Thanks, Fidel. Thank you very much. I just want to talk a bit about my driving career. Many years before I worked for the Sun, I drove a taxi. I wasn't a great cab driver, and I think there was great relief when I eventually returned to cartooning. On one occasion, I was dispatched to a back alley where I was to pick up two men. As I pulled up, a metal door suddenly opened behind them, and two hefty figures with shotguns came out. They ordered me to open the trunk, throwing in a large duffel bag and slamming the trunk shut. Getting in the back of the cab, the first two then directed me to another back alley. On the way there, they asked if I knew what was in the bag. Sweating, I said, "Gym socks." They said no, $250,000. Thinking I was now part of a getaway, I started mentally writing my obituary. It turned out they were bank officials transferring funds from one branch to another. As I dropped them off, they signed the receipt book and told me to take my own tip. Had I thought to take 10%, I could have quit the cab business. A few weeks later, it was my brother's birthday and I was still employed. Hoping to brighten his day, I rented a gorilla suit and drove over to his office to pick him up in my cab. I had asked his secretary to have him come out on the sidewalk, at which point he would then be picked up by a giant ape. On the way there, I passed a couple of officers in a patrol car who may or may not have seen me but decided to keep driving anyway. Overheating from the matted fur of the suit, I pulled up in front of my brother's office, and his secretary convinced him to jump in the back seat. At this point, I turned around and we faced each other, man and gorilla. But somehow, perhaps it was the beady eyes, he knew it was me. On another occasion, I drove a van full of holidaying seniors to Cannon Beach. My last stop before heading south was to pick up a lady named Claire. I carefully helped Claire into the van and then drove away, leaving her one bag behind in the driveway, where, presumably, she'd have some clean clothes upon her return. But I suppose the apex of my driving career came about 5 years ago and is something that I would very much like to forget. It was a long summer weekend, and I had decided to take the ferry over to the island for a couple of days. Initially, both my girlfriend and I were planning to go, but I had said something particularly daft, and so I was going alone. Friday afternoon, I headed up Taylor Way and onto the upper levels, noticing the highway construction as I drove towards the terminal. I was hoping that there would be no delay and that I would sail right onto the ferry, but it was not to be. About a half mile from Horseshoe Bay, I was motioned over to the side of the road and behind a long line of cars by a BC ferry worker. That's it, I thought, I'm not going to make it. Dejected, I joined the long, sorry row and turned off the engine. In my rearview mirror, I could see more and more cars lining up behind me, all in the same boat, or more accurately, not. The worker who had directed the operation had walked over to the concrete barrier and was now sitting down, twirling his two-way radio. Fat lot he cared. This was not my first dealing with the ferry system. Many years ago, my sister Irene dated a fellow named Bob Stone, a London Cockney who worked for Blackball Ferries out of Sultry Bay. On one occasion, Bob took it upon himself to fly the Jolly Roger from the ship's mast, the ferry making at least 2 trips before it was discovered. Bob was fired, or perhaps they made him walk the plank. I don't remember. After about 20 minutes, I heard a crackle on the same radio and noticed movement ahead. The cars were starting to roll, and it looked like I might make it. Mouthing a silent yes, I turned on the engine and got set to release the handbrake. As the car ahead lurched forward, that same ferry worker quickly stepped in front of mine and held up his hand. I wasn't going anywhere. As the last car disappeared, so did my hopes of catching the ferry. It would be a 2-hour wait. Glumly, I settled down again. After 5 minutes, another crackling. This time, the ferry worker strolled over and motioned me to roll down my window. In about 5 minutes, he said, I'm going to get the okay to send you down the hill. I want you to turn on your headlights and head towards the terminal. Keep to the shoulder. You will be the lead car. A shock went through me. Not so much that I might be getting the boat. No, I was going to be the lead car. I have to be honest here, I am not a leader. I am the kind of person who will let someone go ahead of them at the supermarket checkout in case I screw up. Still, it sounded simple. I asked him to repeat the instructions. He did. Lights on, keep to the shoulder, lead car. He then went to the car behind me, and as the driver rolled down the window, I heard the ferry workers say, "Follow him. He knows what to do." I turned on my lights and looked in the rearview mirror. Behind me were cars, trucks, SUVs, and the occasional motorhome, all waiting for me to lead them to Horseshoe Bay. Another crackle and a wave of the hand. I was off. Hugging the shoulder as directed, I maneuvered my car around the coming bends. First one, then another, all the while cognizant of the motorcade that I was leading. After the fifth or sixth turn, I began to grow more confident, more at ease. I started to think that maybe this wasn't all that hard. Maybe I was a leader after all. I would be wrong if I said that I didn't start to feel a bit of pride in my newfound role. I started to imagine myself as a wagon master leading a train of island-bound settlers. I imagined them all thanking me at the end of the road for a safe and remarkable journey. And I grew misty. And then it happened. Up ahead, a small road veered off to the right. What was I to do? The ferry worker had told me to keep to the shoulder, and the shoulder veered right. But the main highway kept going straight ahead. Surely I should keep to the main highway. There were two voices in my head. One said, "Keep going straight." The other one said, "Hug the shoulder." It was the voice of the ferry worker and had a slight crackle. Wild-eyed, I decided that the voice with the crackle knew best and swung the car hard right. Behind me, 117 vehicles followed suit. A slow, twisting cavalcade following in my tracks. Trusting, undoubting, unsuspecting. And then I knew it. I had made a mistake. I was on the wrong road. I was leading a long, lumbering convoy on the road to nowhere. Panicked, I sped up. My only hope was to lose them. Checking the rearview mirror, the procession became smaller and smaller. But not before I caught a quizzical look from below the brows of one hefty trucker. Up ahead, I could see an overpass leading left. If I could just make the turn before they saw me, I would be okay. Screeching left, I had just enough time to make it over and look back to see the maddened horde thundering through on the road to oblivion. And then they were gone. To where, I don't know. I think of them from time to time, wondering if they are happy. Maybe resting on a hillside somewhere, spending their ferry fare on popsicles and wheat. As for me, I slowly headed back to Vancouver, putting my trip to the island off for another time, when I wouldn't be the lead car. Thanks.